Howdy Hexers, welcome to the main HexTCG channel. I'm Mokog and I want to welcome you to our Hexonomics series where we're going over various aspects of the Hex economy and all of the wonderful ways in which you can make your experience in Hex a little bit better by understanding the itty bitty components that are in the game and then using them to your advantage so that you can enhance your collection, enjoy all the wonderful things you can do in Hex. So today we're going to be talking about flipping on the auction house. Flipping as a concept is based on the idea of taking a particular asset and then turning it over and selling it for a profit. It's the old adage, buy low, sell high. But there are a few components to that, and actually executing that concept is something that's well worth exploring, especially in Hex with the tools that we have available inside the game itself. So we're going to cover three basic topics. We're going to be covering finding the opportunities. We're going to talk about building resources for those opportunities, and then where, the goal of what actually flipping assets in the game is actually for. So along that first topic of actually finding opportunities, there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but the primary way that you can do this in-game is going to be actually going to the auction house. So if you're brand new to the game, the auction house is located here in this gavel right here with the pop-up tooltip of auction house. Now, we've done an introduction to the auction house on our Hexonomics before, and so we're not going to go into what each of the buttons and searches are, but we are going to look at ways that we can search to see for different things that might be worth investing in using small amounts of gold and platinum that might be able to turn around for usual profits. Now, I will say that there are a lot of folks who do use basic principles of buy low and sell high to find opportunities on the auction house, because we have a lot of players who may not have the most disposable income to throw into the game, and they use their time in which to find the best prices for everything. So it's going to be highly competitive, but here's some of the basic strategies that folks will use. Now, one of the biggest ones is you have to understand what kind of things they're selling. Now, many times you want to focus on things that you initially think that might be valuable. Start with yourself and see if those types of opportunities can be there. So if you happen to be currently a PvE player, maybe there's something in PvE that could be useful. So one card that's really useful in PvE is something like an Adaptatron. So you would do a quick search to see if Adaptatrons are there and if they're being useful. And there's a couple things we want to look at. So we go, wow, people are trying to sell Adaptatrons for 31 platinum. Well, there's a lot of people trying to sell Adaptatrons for 31 platinum. And in fact, we have 35 pages of people just trying to sell Adaptatrons in general. So this actually tells us something. It gives us what you call a signal. The signal is that there's a lot of Adaptatrons out there. And so even if you happen to have a few Adaptatrons that you have to sell, you may not be able to sell them because of how flooded the market looks. Now, the other side to remember is we have two currencies. So the other thing you want to do is that if you see a lot already in platinum, see what they're selling for gold. Gold is a very different and more fluid market. And we see we still have quite a few items, but they are significantly lower in cost. So if you have a bunch of a rare, even a PvE rare, trying to sell for 31 platinum, I mean, honestly, over 20 pages worth of it, you're probably not going to sell it for platinum, but you could sell it for gold. If you have extra Adaptatrons burning a hole in your pocket, this could be an early opportunity for selling at a gold value. But you can tell already that the amount of gold that you get for an Adaptatron on the buyout, especially because it's minus 5%, is probably not a good place to look for flipping. You have a very small margin between what you end up earning and what you end up getting. Likely what we probably see, one of the reasons we see so many folks putting up 31 platinum Adaptatrons is to try to be one of those random folks who someone has more plat than they do gold and they decide to go ahead and just drop platinum for it. And that's going to be very sporadic. Over time, you might be able to play a numbers game, but it's not a consistent opportunity and it may not be worth your time. But if you need to pick up Adaptatrons, that's probably not a bad price. So the question is that if we wanted to stay constrained within the prices we have here, how do we know where an opportunity might be, right? So let's make sure there's no opportunities worth investing in an Adaptatron right now. So we're thinking gold. Okay, gold's fine. Well, let's go ahead and see if what we have on our sorts here. So it initially sorts by minimum bid, so you get the lowest bids first. So the lowest bid you're going to find one of these for is 900 gold. It's going to be really hard to try to snipe a concept of bidding at the very last minute of an auction to try to get for the lowest value. It's going to be very hard to snipe something at 901. And even then, the spread between what you can sell it at, it appears to be about 1400, and it could technically still be lower. So that's a lot of time investment for a very small amount of gold that you could just go play a game for. So if we just take a peruse through what the auction house is telling us, it looks like the lowest one that you'd be able to buy one for is 1,000. Adaptatron, we look at the concept of the spread, what we buy it for, what we sell it for, and how much time it takes to actually do all of those materials, like what it takes to actually buy one, then get it listed, and then to wait for it to sell. When you're looking at gold, you might as well just go play a couple games in the arena and you'll make the same amount of gold with a lot less hassle. And so what we say here is Adaptatron is not something you would flip. There's just not enough of an opportunity there. So let's go see if we can try and find what opportunities will be available. So one great ways to take a look at is that many times you may find opportunities in legendary cards. So when you're looking at legendary cards, there's quite a few that could be there and available, and a lot of the times these may be in plat. So we see we have a lot of fantastic cards here in plat, but we have the whole swath and selection. We have 234 pages. You want to go based on your inclinations here. Especially when you're first starting out, go with something you know. And since Primal Dawn is our current set, narrow it down, take a look at what's happening in Primal Dawn. And what we see now is that we have a lot of legendaries selling above the minimum floor, but they're definitely selling below the cost of a pack. And legendaries is something very particular you want to pay attention to on this. The minimum that you can sell a legendary card for is just above 50 platinum. 51 platinum is the very lowest buyout that you can do. And generally, because there's 1 in 9 cards, 1 in 9 rares is going to be a legendary card, these should have an elevated type of availability. It should be harder to get these cards, and you would normally see this reflected. And most of the time, the average of what that effect has been for Hex has been an on-par legendary is about 200 platinum, the same cost as a pack. So every time you see one fall under the cost of a pack, you should have two thoughts go into your mind. Hey, I can pick this thing up for a bargain, or this thing is not worth trying to flip. So let's answer the second question, let's answer the first question. Is this a bargain? And the way you do that, since we only have 29 pages of material to look through, is you take a look and you see what kind of things we're looking at. We're seeing Titans of Voktar, Chrono Demons, Damox, Primal Dawns, Poets of Galaki. These are all pretty substantially under the buyout value of 200 platinum. But something that we can notice along the way is that as we keep perusing through these pages, we're going to be getting closer and closer to our value. Now, the faster way to do that is to sort this out by minimum buyout. So by clicking it twice after just loading up, you're going to see your minimum buyout. And we want to get close to about that 200 value and see what cards, and you want to pay attention to what's going through. Like we're seeing more Primal Dawns, we're seeing Bogbergs now, we're seeing Twin Eternities, and we're getting closer and closer. So for instance, someone's trying to sell a Bogberg here for about 200, and now we're seeing Bloombergs, or Bloombringers. So we're now at the 200 platinum. So what this is telling us from our earliest assumptions is that for Twin Eternities, they're almost worth the price of a pack. But what people are trying to tell us here on the auction house now is Bloombringers are worth slightly more than a pack. So if we take that as an understanding, and you're just kind of first starting out, you want to try, we answer the question, if we purchased at 210 platinum how much higher would we have to sell it to make it a reasonable profit? Let's say to make about a 30 platinum profit. And once you do those calculations, you find out that unless you bought a whole slew of these cards and tried to relist and put their price up a little bit, you're not going to anywhere near get to an elevation in price that makes it worthwhile to flip and plat. The other side of that is there a Bloomberg far enough below the price of a booster pack, far enough below 200 platinum to consider? And the answer to that right now is no, it's not really there. So when you're looking at the concept of finding that flip, you want to gauge and kind of get a feel for the market to start off. Now, primarily folks who are super serious on flipping cards, they utilize things like spreadsheet, they're utilizing the auction house data, they're looking at averages over time, median values over time, to see what people have been buying and selling cards for, so that they can answer these questions without having to go through the interface. And it's an absolutely fantastic feature that Hex has made available on the forums. You can jump into it and grab all that auction house data yourself. It's freely downloadable from the GameForge servers, and you can bring those into whatever spreadsheet program you like, analyze, pull the data 5 different ways, and get all this information. But once you have it, once you decide what you've figured out, what could be a possible flip, and Freak of Nature could be a fantastic one. So we look with this Primal Dawn Legendaries and Freak. We see we have a card that actually does a pretty good range. Freak of Nature has often sold for as high as about 650 to 700 platinum, but now we have something that is selling for as a buyout for about 515. Now, Freak of Nature is a fantastic card. It's a little heavy on its thresholds, having 2 wild, 2 blood, but its abilities are fantastic, and what it can do in the crypt, as well as its ability to come back in the current archetypes, is proving itself in constructed right now. So this is a valuable card. It's selling, if you look at this, what's the opportunity cost of this 500 platinum here? Well, that's basically 2.5 packs is what they're saying. So buying one Freak of Nature is like buying 2.5 packs. So there could be a chance that someone values it closer to 3 packs, which is when you would be paying 600 plat for it. So this is one that you might want to keep an eye on. It's got a lower volume. There's only at most 10 that we have here. And in fact, it looks like we're at 9, so there's only a few available. It's got a pretty interesting price spread, and the top end of that might be worth looking at, because you're at basically a difference of greater than or right around 10%. And the reason you want to look at that is because you're wanting to make sure that you cover that 5% cost that it comes from actually relisting the item when you're done. So Freak of Nature could be on the longer term side of when we're looking for the flip. Now, cards are a great place to start. The downside of attempting to flip cards is you have to have a very good knowledge of what's actually occurring on the auction house. It's very difficult to read very quickly. And most importantly, you have to have a very good understanding of what makes a good card in Hex. And that is something that is developed over time. It will take a little bit to see what plays out well in the meta, what could just be a limited card. These types of skills, since they take time to develop, are not one of the great places to start first. What can be a great place to start first is something like booster packs. So limited in Hex is actually one of the primary queues that fire for tournaments. And presently in limited, when you're looking at Sealed Gauntlet and Evo Gauntlet, we actually have some fantastic and interesting things going on here. So right now, all prize payouts, with the exception of Sealed, are generally being in Primal Dawn booster packs. And in Sealed, and Draft to a smaller extent, once you go once you go 5 and X on whatever your Sealed pool is, you're going to get 4 Primal Dawn booster packs and 2 Armies of Myth. So you're getting a lot of Primal Dawn booster packs into the market and fewer Armies of Myth than when we were several months ago. And we can see that the auction house is kind of telling us this. Right now, if you wanted to buy a pack off the auction house, you can get it for 172 platinum. That gives you a pretty fair idea of what people are valuing a Primal Dawn pack right now. And if we wanted to switch this over to Armies of Myth, we find that, wow, this is really unusual. 192 platinum. That's only 8 platinum under the purchase price for a standard Armies of Myth booster pack. In many cases, you may just want to go ahead and purchase the pack from the store at this point. And, we may have 7 pages of it, but these prices are still really high by comparison, where you have one of them at 172 and the other at 192. That's a very interesting spread there. So this tells us that this might be something worth looking at. So we want to look at it at one of the most interesting places. There's a type of thing called a currency arbitrage through a product, and we're going to look at that as probably the more complex end of flipping a card. And in this case, we're going to, instead of it being a card, we're going to look at it through booster packs. So let's take a look at the gold value of a Primal Dawn pack. So we see that if we were to purchase, our cost side of a Primal Dawn pack right now, there's not a huge spread, roughly about 1,000 gold between the bid and the buyout. So it's probably worth the buyout in this case because of the time value of gold. That's, at most 15 minutes to make up that amount of gold in the arena. So we look at it, so we see 23,900. So that's our cost in gold. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Armies of Myth. Oh my, this already tells us something very similar. And it's actually really interesting. So the difference between a Primal Dawn pack and an Armies of Myth booster pack is exceedingly significant. I mean, we're talking 5,000, just under 5,000 gold difference between them at the buyout price, with an even smaller spread of 28,359. We'll go ahead and say 28,400. We'll round up a little bit just to be generous and keep some smaller numbers. And we already know 192 and 172. So if we want to see how much gold we get per plat, we're going to pull up our handy dandy calculator, and we'll start with Primal Dawn. So Primal Dawn 23,900. We're going to divide it by what we could purchase the booster pack at, and that ratio is 138. Now, if we compare 28,400 and we divide it by the 192, we find that ratio is roughly 147. So this kind of tells us a few things. The biggest one being is that if we have gold, it takes 147 gold presently to buy a booster pack with gold on the auction house for Armies of Myth. But it's only 138 gold per plat equivalent to buy at Primal Dawn. These kind of differences is where we can start thinking about the ideas of arbitrage. And this is where we come into gathering your resources. Because as a free player, you're primarily going to have gold. So what we want to consider is how do we get the most resources for our buck, basically. For our time, primarily in this case. So if we've built up 100,000 gold, how would we want to spend this right now? What would be the best way for us to try to maximize our output and minimize our costs? Well, for one thing, the difference in platinum is much smaller than the difference in gold. So if you take a look at the difference in platinum, there's a difference in 20 platinum between these types of booster packs. And if you take a look at the whole difference in gold, we'll go ahead and be a little bit more precise here to take our 28,400 and we'll go ahead and subtract our 23,900. That difference is 4,500. So there's a wider spread in gold than there is in platinum. So what that tells us, it gives us an indication of direction. So the direction would be is if I take my gold and I put it into Primal Dawn boosters, I can then take and sell those boosters at 172. So if we sold those at 172, how much would we get back? So we would get back 95% of that, rounded in the positive direction. So we would get 163 platinum in that transaction. That's actually what we would wind up with at this point. But, that does change. It adds basically another 9 platinum difference than what we have there. So you have to make up that 30 plat, 29 more specifically, but we'll say 30 to be round numbers here. 30 plat difference between that. But if you took 4,500 and divided it by that new difference, that's 150 to 1 conversion, which means your best value, if you're comparing your exchanges, if you can take the plat and turn it into gold, you have a really good chance of increasing your total amount of gold. And then once you're getting gold at that better rate, taking platinum, turning it into gold, you can then sell the gold at a better ratio in trade chat for closer to 125 to 1. That's where you're making your profit. It's convoluted, which is what's making flipping so difficult to do on the auction house right now. Because we have to start in one product. We have to start in Primal Dawn because we're taking our gold and we're going, all right, let's get this booster. Okay, we've sold the booster off now. We can take this platinum and get the Armies of Myth booster, sell that for gold because it's got a better gold ratio, and then take the profit from that and then sell it on the trade chat to try to actually get the difference between those. That's a lot of steps. Is it worth it at the very end of the day? And what I think we'll tend to find is that we want to simplify transactions because of how cumbersome we presently have going through here and listing things. So let's change our mindset up about flipping. Maybe it's not just to make the standard idea of increased margins over profit, but how do we flip assets to make sure that we have the most fun? So your standard flips are going to be looking at these ratios again. Let's think of these as measurements instead. So if I have gold and I need platinum, what would be the best way for me to turn that into something else? So I'm flipping gold to try to turn into platinum. Well, the first thing you try to do is trade chat, right? Because you'd be like, hey, I'm selling gold. I need, I'll do it at a ratio. And let's say you want to be generous, 130 to 1. You need the platinum now, right? Because you need to do your draft or you need to enter into your constructed tournament. You may find a taker, you might not. So if you're not finding any takers, or maybe just no one's buying platinum that day or buying gold that day, then you're going to have to go through the auction house. And then that's where these methods are useful. So then we would look at, okay, how much of something do people that want and need can I buy? Well, that's where our ratio came in. Right now, Primal Dawn packs are the ones that happen to have the better ratio between their gold value to their platinum value. Because having gold, you want that number to be small. The smaller that number is, as you being the one who's holding gold, the more value you're getting in platinum. It's the reverse if you want to go from platinum to gold. If you have platinum and you need gold, you want that number to be very large, the difference between the platinum to gold ratio, because you want your platinum to stretch as far as possible. And the interplay between those develops our exchange and gives us information on what players' desires are. But for what we know now, if we need platinum and no one's buying it in trade chat, then this is where we want to go, because everyone needs booster packs. They may not always need the cards in them, but they are going to need booster packs. And so we've already seen a little bit of a price uptick. Tells you how fluid some things are. And you always want to make sure that you do your sorts so that we're back down to our 172, because every platinum counts. So we would spend our gold, try to sell it for here, and then we wind up with that 163 platinum, probably by the end of the evening if we undercut a little bit. might wind up with 160 platinum there. And then we can convert our gold into platinum that way. The downside, it's costing you more time. It is costing you 5% of each of your transactions. It's not efficient. Efficient way, trade chat, hands down. The less efficient way, and in case maybe you have a bad schedule, you can't, be on for longer than 10-15 minutes, this is one way that you can do that. And that's really because you want to look at being able to build resources. And so if you're able to play for a few hours during the weekend, you build up some gold, you take it, you buy some packs throughout the week with your gold when some of the prices get a little low, you've got a little bit of a stockpile, then you can start making and planning these decisions. So, because what we know now is that presently it looks like we're getting a lot more gold into our economy than we are getting platinum into our economy, and so that ratio between platinum and gold is widening, and it's making it very good for platinum for people who have platinum to buy gold, but not as easy for gold buyer or gold players to buy into platinum. So finding these little intricacies is one of the things that's going to help allow you to flip things. Being able to pay attention to timing is also very crucial in this process. Sometimes you'll find your packs at 172, and sometimes you'll be able to find a really good gold price during the weekend. Maybe this will drop down to 22,000 gold during the weekend. Maybe buying during the weekend could help you out a little bit more, but you gotta watch. If you're not a big fan of rummaging through data and seeing what sale prices are and looking at this through tools outside of the client, you got to put in the time and watch what prices are going on. Now, all of this is fine and dandy, but you have to ask yourself the question, what is my end game in doing this? Do I get do I just get the intrinsic pleasure of understanding that I have owned the auction house? Does it make you smile inside when you realize that maybe you've purchased all of the packs that are going to be here, and then they've elevated a little bit in platinum just because of the stuff that you've been doing? Sometimes people feel really good knowing that they are impacting and having a financial impact. There is a sense of pleasure that can be from that. But others, they realize that the end game is actually, maybe it's getting down here into the tournaments. Maybe they want to go from being a free-to-play player to moving into a limited player. Maybe they're a limited player and they realize they want to move to constructed. One of the things you want to consider whenever you're really operating on the auction house is, what are you doing it for? You got to have an end game. If you're just, playing around, this is your first TCG, you're just like, man, I really like the PvE, I just want to have a little bit more resources, then you can just, you want to run to the auction house, check and see what's going on, sell all of your extra stuff at whatever price you deem is fair. Sometimes it'll sell, sometimes it won't. You don't have to worry about flipping if you don't have an end goal in mind. But understanding the movements of the auction house back and forth, understanding packs, knowing what cards may be undervalued at a particular time. Speculating on even things like mercenaries can be interesting. At some point, we don't know what all of these guys will be doing. They could be doing something amazing, they could be doing something terrible. Because there is also something that's a long-term flip. So if we wanted to right now, we could probably buy this Ashasa here, maybe even for 1 or 2 platinum. It would be a long-term play to see whether or not that pays out over in the long term. But if you got the time, it's not like they're taking up space, right? And if you wanted to do something like that, you would take a look and you would see what would be selling out here at the low end, seeing what stuff you might be able to find that's very, very close. So for instance, you can find the Hawkcore, you get it for just a little bit under half price. And you can see what people are trying to sell certain things for. Like this guy right here, don't buy the Slam Vault. They have it listed for platinum instead of gold. That is not a good thing right there. Portensio, different story. He's a Gen Con exclusive. But then you have other ones like Scab Tongue, which are hard to get, Triumvirate, which was much easier to get. And you can look for anything that seems like it might be a really good buy. For instance, the Zaharax here. This one might be a pretty good buy. It might not. We won't know until, so this moves from flipping to speculation. A speculation is a projection of what you think is going to occur in the future, and you're buying now to flip at what you think your projection is going to be. This has a lot of risk associated with it. It's nowhere near like what we're talking about with short-term packs. Though simpler in concept, buy low, sell high later, you don't necessarily will have the opportunity to sell high. So for a consideration, Hawkor could be something that you can call low risk. It's 20 platinum, 2 dimes. Even if you bought it out now, if he turns out to be really useful, 3 sets down the line when folks can't get him anymore and he's a great PvE deck, well, maybe he'll be worth 30 platinum. Then it's not so bad. So then if you pick him up at 11, you have a fantastic spread. In fact, you almost basically would triple what you invested into Hawkor here. But that is a speculation. You have to have the platinum, your resources you've built up over doing very prudent use of your time, building up your platinum, buying packs when it was good, selling packs when they were high, those pretty safe flips over time to build up your resources, to then move into speculation. Speculation is always something where you may not necessarily get the return you're thinking of. And in a market like Hex, it's very easy to speculate, especially on cards, but also on things that we don't have the full functionality known yet. So for instance, right now, Scab Tongue could be, right now, his price is because he's rare. He's very difficult to get. He doesn't come off the Wheel of Fate very often, but he could not actually be a very good deck at all. So someone could pay 990 platinum now thinking that once this thing becomes the next PvE savior, then he's totally going to be worth like 1800 platinum, just like a Portentio. It's going to be awesome. When in reality, he could just be a null deck that is kind of aggro, but then gets outdone by orcs. We don't know. And so someone who was thinking of speculating on a Scab Tongue now, well, if they buy it at 990 and they can only sell it for 100 plat later, they lost that spread. And you have to be very careful about that because it will happen, especially if you start speculating on higher costed items. So let me give you a fantastic example of what it could be, what could be good or bad speculation. And I do have to spell it correctly. So a good set of speculation here is Infinitrix. Now, I like myself some Infinitrix. She's a great card. She's a 3/4. She fits in a good spot. But if we're going to talk about speculation, we're going to be seeing quite a few high Infinitrixes because of how often Primal Dawn packs are getting generated. They're the primary output that we're getting. So we have to ask, is High Infinitrix going to remain a valuable card and constructed in the near term? So even if that answer is yes, I'll parlay a story here. Vampire King has always been a valuable card and constructed. It's always made blood, even in the various incarnations of blood, a powerhouse to be dealt with because it has an amazing effect as well as evasion with life drain at 3/4, hard to kill, all of that good stuff. Vampire King is a good card. But Vampire Kings were not always, 2,000 platinum. There was a time that they dropped as low as 1,400 platinum. So depending on your time horizons, you could get burned on Vampire Kings. High Infinitrix is going to be the same way. Though more flexible than Vampire King in many cases, High Infinitrix is in a state to where she's going to be readily available for a while. You may not want to pay 2,300 platinum for her, but maybe 1950? We don't know exactly how often she's going to be at the values she's at and for how long she will be. What we do know is that there's going to be a lot of flexibility in these prices, and a lot of people will be selling their Infinitrixes, trying to make sure that they can keep doing their drafts. Maybe it's just an extra, it's at a good price right now. You pull this card, it feels like you're winning the lottery. It is something that you're more than likely going to sell once you have your full play set of. keeping them right now may not be the best idea in the world, because there's a chance that they'll act like Vampire King. Maybe they'll go down to 1800 platinum, 1700 platinum. If they do, you could have sold it at 2000. And then once you sold it at 2000, if you kept the plat, you buy it again at 1700. Then it goes up with the next set, and maybe it's a little bit more versatile. It goes up to 2500 platinum. You could sell it again, or you could keep it, see if it goes longer. Whenever a card is in circulation presently, you're going to get movement, and movement is ripe for speculation. It's ripe for flipping. So, but always high value, be careful. High value, high risk. And as we have a few members in chat saying, there are several stories of being able to sell legendary cards, Vampire King specific. Let's go ahead and pull Vampire King up, because we only have one legendary vampire. Presently, we find that Vampire Kings are actually selling extraordinarily well. So they're up at 29, basically 30k plat. And if you had bought one at 20 or 2,000 platinum, and you can sell it at nearly 3,000 platinum, that's a pretty good buy. That's a pretty good sell there. It's something to keep in mind. And it's the concept of what your term is, whether you need resources now or you can hold and get resources later. And it's very nuanced. There's not going to be a guaranteed way to do it. The best way to understand when to take action is to try to be knowledgeable about what's there. Make a list. Keep the cards in a list that you want to keep track of. Spend 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes when you first log on or when you log off to see what's going on. Check it a few times throughout the day. The auction house is always going to be in flux. So that's kind of the core. The idea of, we covered 3 basic concepts today. So for flipping, you want to know how to find the opportunity, leverage the auction house and the tools surrounding it to make the most of your time, so that you don't spend the whole time that you're playing Hex just perusing it. But narrow your focus, understand what the opportunities might be. Build your resources. You want to make sure that you don't just try to do big grandiose trades. Sometimes doing small trades over time for small profits gives you the resources you need to do bigger things later. And then also understand what your end game is. Do you want to move from a free player to a limited player? Do you want to move from a free player to a constructed player? The ways you go about and the cards and materials that you look at on the auction house vary depending on what that goal is. And especially if you just get pleasure and enjoyment off playing auction house the game, there's plenty of entertainment here and plenty of opportunity for someone who enjoys the auction house to just keep going in. Though sometimes after you've been in the auction house for a few hours, you might want to turn on some music, because there's only so often that you can hear that bazaar. Oh my. So we've covered quite a bit about flipping in the auction house today. Pretty shortly we're going to go into our Q&A, where we will field some questions. If you're catching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Please hit that like and subscribe button for more. And as always, I'm Mokog. This is HexHunter on the HexTCG channel, and let's do some Q&A now.